Right.
Welcome everybody. This is our first webinar of the school year, right? I think Jason, is that right?
Yeah, that's
this is Sunday webinars.
Yep.
Yeah. And my name is Chris Burkett. I teach politics and history here at Ashland University. And I'll let my colleague introduce himself.
Hi everyone. Jason Stevens. I also teach political science and history at Ashland University.
And we are co-directors of the Ashbrook Scholar Program, which is an undergraduate program here. It's for undergraduate students who are interested in the serious study of history and political science and political economics. And you don't even have to major in those things. We have quite a few Ashbrook scholars who don't major in history or political science, but nonetheless are interested enough to take some classes and hear some interesting speakers that we have come in. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to let either of us know. But we're gonna do this. Professor Stevens and I are gonna do this, even though it's online. We're gonna try to do this discussion of the Declaration of Independence pretty much the way we do it in our classrooms, which is to we always start with original documents or texts, and we like to do things conversationally. So if you'd like to jump into the conversation, hit the hand icon. Since we have so many people, that's probably best. If you just raise your hand, there's a hand icon, and if you have a thought or a question or a comment, please feel free to jump into the conversation. So, Jason, do you have any thoughts at the beginning you want to start us with? How do we?
Yeah, so we're talking about the Declaration of Independence tonight. A great document to start with, and I hope that everyone had the time to go through this document, to read the thing. And by the way, if you ever read one of these old documents and you come to the end and you think to yourself, I have no idea what I just read. What I would recommend doing is go back to the beginning and read it out loud. If you're reading silently and it's going over your head, go back and read the text out loud. And when I do that, I always understand it better. And I've been reading the Declaration of Independence out loud for years. I've read it hundreds of times, and I still learn new things by having these conversations with groups like you. So, Professor Burkett, what do you say? What do you just want to jump in here to the text? Why don't we?
Best way to start. Way to start to understand the document is to just jump right in and start reading.
We're not going to worry about dipping our toes in the water here. Let's just jump in. So, how does the Declaration begin? How does the Declaration begin? We want to read this out loud, so anybody want to volunteer to do this? Maybe that's a good place to start.
Are people raising their hands? I see some people saying they can't find a hand, Katie.
Yeah, I'm working on that. Can you guys see the hands? I might need to. I need to pass the presenter to you. Chris, would you like the presenter, or because I'm pretty sure whoever has the presenter can see the hand.
Oh, so, either one of us is fine.
Oh, okay.
Right. Jason, why don't you give it to Jason?
Yeah, that's fine.
So as Catherine just chatted, if you click on your name, a little hand icon should show up as well as a camera icon and a microphone.
Mm-hmm.
And you should click on the microphone to mute yourself if you're not speaking. And if you want to turn your video on, click on the camera icon. And if you want to jump into the conversation, click on the hand icon.
Yes, and then the hand icon should be found in the, there should be a participants list on either the right side or the left side of the screen. I've been seeing that from both angles. So there should be participants that will have your name on the very top of it, and then the right of that should be your name. If you can't access the participant list, you can find that by, again, hovering over your screen where the buttons pop up at the bottom, and then one of the options says participants, and that's how you access that.
What is wrong? I thought this was the generation that sort of just intuitively understood all this computer stuff. What's wrong with you guys? Professor Stevens and I are the old farts in this. We're the ones who aren't supposed to be able to find anything.
We're the ones who struggle here.
I'm just kidding.
And then also 2 notes. One, I've already sent it, is if you want to turn off the chat feed, the chat noise, that can be found in the edit tab, and then preferences. You can turn that off. And then also try to message me because I will solve the audio issue. So just not to distract everyone with the noise.
So a lot of people still can't find a hand, so we'll have to.
That's okay. Well, why don't we do this? Some people say they have found the hand, others are still working on it. Katie, if you could, help them out and message Katie privately. She'll, she's put her to work. She's really, really good at what she does, and we love having her here at the Ashbrook Center. So if you're having any problems, just quickly message her. But I think now. I think now I should be able to see the hand raising. So why don't we do this? I'm going to just start reading here. Follow along in the text if you have it in front of you. And, maybe we'll read a sentence or two here and we'll just ask some questions and have a conversation about this. So I'll just start here from the top. Declaration of Independence in Congress, July 4th, 1776. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. In the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. Decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Just stop there. We haven't even gotten to sort of the most iconic or the most famous line in the Declaration. I think you know what I'm talking about. That's coming up. But there, just the opening salvo of the Declaration, the introduction, the preamble, whatever you want to call it. What do you notice about that? Anything striking to you? All right, Catherine, I see in the comments says the unanimous. Katie, for some reason, oh wait, no, I do see a hand here. You see a hand. Grace, I see. You want to go ahead? Yeah, the question again is just what do you notice? What do you notice in that first that opening paragraph or the opening sentence of the Declaration? Grace, are you not able to?
Oh, sorry. I pressed the hand earlier for reading.
Oh, okay. So you weren't responding to this.
No, it was the previous one.
Oh, I see. Do you have any thoughts on the opening?
Not yet.
Not yet? Well, think about it. Let's see. That's okay. Somebody, who was it? I saw somebody just in the chat function that popped up and disappeared really fast because lots of people I think are trying to chat here. Somebody mentioned the word unanimous, jumped out to them. Who was that? I think Catherine? Catherine, was that you?
How do I mute the sound? Because now I'm stuck. Why do you press on me?
I see Hannah.
Why am I?
Is that Hannah?
Yeah, I see Hannah. Hannah, did you want to jump in here?
No.
Oh, sorry.
I think she's trying to find the mute button. Is that right? We'll get used to this as we do this tonight. We'll start to get used to it. It's okay. Don't worry.
You always have these sort of first night technical bugs to work out.
Yeah. So I'm still not seeing any hands. Are there any hands?
I'm not seeing any hands either.
The hand feature isn't working at all.
Yeah, I'm not.
Somebody just chatted. That was interesting. What was that chat?
Would it be easier if we just sort of open this up to, right, you unmute yourself when you want to say something and then just mute yourself afterwards? Why don't we try that, since the hand function doesn't seem to be working. So anybody could just jump on in here. What do you notice about that opening of the Declaration of Independence? Let's see, JK, I don't know who that is, but
Yes,
JK, are you trying to say something?
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing that I noticed in the first section is that was the word unanimous, which like implies that all the 13 states are like together in this.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. So this is just Josiah speaking, right?
This is Joseph or Joey.
Or Joey. Okay, Joey. So you focus there on the word unanimous, right? It said
Yeah.
at the very top, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. And unanimous. What did you say that meant?
It meant that they were all together on this. Like they were like one team for this.
Yeah. Okay. That's okay. That's really interesting. So they're one team. That's I think that's exactly right. The word unanimous. I mean, you hit the ball out of the park with that one, right? Uni just won, and unanimous. Anima is the root word there, which means soul or mind. So, for example, Aristotle writes this book called De Anima, on the soul. Anima is that root word there, and unanimous. You said, what did you say, Josiah? One team? It's one mind, or one mind. One mind, one spirit, one soul. That is what we are. Well, actually, that's what from the very beginning. Thomas Jefferson, who's the main author of the Declaration, right? He's saying this is sort of the one mind of the. What did you say, Josiah? The 13 United States of America, right?
Oh, this is Joey. Yeah, but 13 United States of America.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sasha.
They're one mind in this.
Why is that significant? Sorry. Yeah.
I was just going to say, Sasha wanted to jump in on this too, right? Sasha, go right ahead, please.
Yeah, please.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I was actually going to bring up kind of a completely different point. I was looking through it and noticed the separate and equal, which kind of reminded me of how later on in America they used the separate but equal to keep segregation alive. And I can't really figure out what he meant by that clause in the sentence, but I thought it was really interesting that the wording is so similar.
Yeah, okay, Sasha, let's talk about that, because that catches my eye too. So what is meant by this reference to the separate and equal station? Do you have any sort of guesses as to what maybe that is talking about?
Can I just jump in for a second on that
Please.
too? Because this is interesting what Sasha brought up. So Sasha, your point is really important because you're thinking of the language of separate but equal that was used to justify segregation, right? Later in American history. And I don't think this has anything to do with that at all directly. But I will point, I just wanted to mention that there's a big difference between saying two things are separate and equal and saying two things are separate but equal. So it sounds, when I say separate and equal, it sounds like I'm asserting not only are we separate from all other nations, but we are equal to all other nations. Whereas later, during the segregation years and after the Civil War, when certain states were passing those laws of segregation, segregating schools and restaurants and shops and everything else, bathrooms and everything else, they were saying, yeah, they're separate, but they're equal, right? So I'm saying it a certain way. You see what I'm getting at, Sasha, right? So they would say they're separate but equal as a justification for the separateness. But in this document, they're saying we are separate and equal. There's a much more positive assertion of this equality thing in this first paragraph. Now, who's equal and in what sense they're equal is what Professor Stevens, I think, is trying to get at here, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's a great point. Maybe we need to go back and reread part of this preamble again, just to remind ourselves of what's going on here. So we know that the 13 United States, right, Joey tells us, are acting with one mind, and they issue this declaration. So what is the substance or the content of that one mind? That's what we see in the rest of the declaration. So let's just maybe look at this first sentence again. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So, like Sasha, I'm drawn to this phrase, the separate and equal station, that this one people will occupy after they have dissolved the political bands which have connected them, presumably, with another one people. So this separate and equal station, in this position that they are now assuming among the powers of the earth, what is going on here? Could somebody maybe try to put this in plain English for us? Focusing just on that separate and equal station, that the one people will, whoever those one people are, that they will occupy. This is tough. This is a hard sentence. I mean, the opening, this is a paragraph, but really it's just one long sentence. So who wanted to?
Yeah, Jefferson's trying to say a lot in one sentence, and this is why teachers say don't use run-on sentences, right? Because it's hard to take everything in that one sentence. But
yeah, if we were to hand this into our teachers, right, they would pull out their red pen and start, writing all over it. Like, no, break this up, turn this into a, 2 or 3 sentences.
I jump in?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So when it says separate and equal, it reminds me of when there was like no taxation without representation. So the colonists felt unrepresented in the court of England, to where the crown would tax the colonists unfairly. And so what stands out to me is when they say separate and equal, meaning they want to be separate from them, but held to the same standard. And
Grace, can you say that last part again? I think you're onto something. In fact, I think you're sort of right on the periphery of it. So say that last part again.
The colonists in New England wanted to be held to the same standard and seen at the same standard as England was, instead of being constantly looked down upon by those in Great Britain or England.
Right. So connect what you just said there with what we're seeing here in the document. You're absolutely right. But connect that point with the separate and equal station that this one people, right, the Americans will now occupy, having declared their independence. What are they saying to Great Britain?
They're basically saying that they're going to now run their country separately from them.
That's right. That's exactly right. That we are separating ourselves, right, from Great Britain, and we are going to stand on a separate and equal basis in regards to Great Britain, in regards to France, in regards to Spain, every other independent nation among the world. I think that's what Jefferson means when he talks about, the powers of the earth. The powers of the earth, that's a reference, I think, to all the different sovereign nations of the world. That we will stand in relationship to Great Britain just like Spain or France does. We are our own people. We are independent from this other one people, these Englishmen now, and we justify our stance according to. Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah. Somebody want to jump in?
Eric wants to jump in too, by the way.
So I was thinking that it sounds a little like they're saying that they want to be equal, or they need to be equal, and in order for them to be equal to Britain and to other peoples, they need to separate from their mother country.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's right. Although, I would stress, we're talking about, right, the Americans and the English, or some of us have been, calling them the colonists. With the exception of the very first line, right, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America, when the declaration starts here in the first sentence regarding, that begins with when in the course of human events, from there until the end of the next paragraph even, there's no reference here to Englishmen or Great Britain or America or colonists, right? It's just one people, any one people.
Yeah, I find that really interesting, Jason, because the justification, a lot of people say, well, when they read the first paragraph, they say, well, what they're saying is we Americans are declaring our independence. We're going to be separate from Great Britain. We're going to become a nation, and we're justifying that to the rest of the world, which is partly true. But in the first paragraph, as you point out, it's all written in third person, right? There's no we, there's no American. The first time you see the word we is in the second paragraph. So in the first paragraph, Jefferson is describing a situation that could apply to any people. In other words, what's being expressed in the first paragraph is kind of universal. It's not just something that describes the American people. It could describe any people who, when in the course of human events, find it necessary to dissolve their political bands, right, with another nation, or another people, I should say, and become separate and equal to all other peoples or nations. So it's very universal. Yeah.
What I'm hearing you saying is that any people anywhere longing to be free or to break free from tyranny can simply copy and paste these first two paragraphs and justify their independence upon the same grounds.
Yeah, see, and that's what I find really, and I know we have a couple of people who want to jump in here, Zechariah and Cooper here in just a second, but I'd love to hear what you have to say, but I find that really audacious. I mean, look, we know they're declaring independence. We know it's dangerous. That's a bold, daring move. It's dangerous, right? Because the people who are writing this declaration have been branded rebels and sentenced to death by the king, right? And that's so just saying we're going to be independent is bold and daring and dangerous and audacious. But the first paragraph is even more bold and audacious when they say, we're not just separating, we're declaring to the whole world, we think anybody has a right to do this. That's new, that's radical, that's dangerous, and nobody's ever made that statement before in history. So really a bold statement to begin with. And it's only in the second paragraph that they get down to saying, here's why I think the Americans are going to separate. But
Right, because in the first paragraph, as you point out, it's all they, them, right? Those are the pronouns we see. So third person plural.
A people, them, right.
Now, in the second paragraph, the very first word, it changes to first person plural. Now, this is what this one people, what we Americans hold to, what we believe.
Yeah, and again, Cooper, let's see. I'm trying to get my chat thing to work here. I think Cooper wanted to jump in. Who else wanted to jump in?
Peter trying to raise his hand here. So Peter, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, Peter and then Cooper. Let's see who else is on here.
I find it interesting that it's not quite copy pastable because in the Civil War, the Union does not let the South leave. So in some senses, they don't hold to that same truth that anyone can break a bond later in history.
Well, that's a big question. That's a big question. Yeah, and in some ways, that's a different seminar. In fact, that would require going through a discussion of the causes of the Civil War and Abraham Lincoln and secession. We could talk about that more if you'd like. I mean, the question is if revolution and secession are the same thing. I think another question that I have in my mind is I'm not sure if what the South is doing during the Civil War is the exact same thing, right? Would the South copy and paste these first two paragraphs? They copy and paste some of it. In fact, a lot of it in some cases. But there's one part of this declaration they never copy and paste, and it's that part about all human beings being created equal. So actually, I sort of agree with you. Yeah, in fact, the Southerners say we're not going to copy and paste the whole thing because we don't agree with the whole thing. But again, that's outside of our scope here in a way.
I was just going to say, Jason, if I could just say quickly on this point, in the first paragraph, they make this bold claim that any people has a right to be separate and equal, but we haven't gotten to it yet. But in the second paragraph, Jefferson does lay out some criteria for when it's justifiable, right? So it turns out yeah, people has a right to do this, but sometimes it's justifiable and sometimes it's not. But we don't get to that till we get toward the middle and end of the second paragraph. So, but I think it's a great point to keep in mind as we keep reading this. So, by the way, Zechariah wanted to jump in earlier too, and I missed him on the queue here.
Oh.
Zechariah, are you still there?
Can I jump in?
Yeah. If somebody else wants to jump in, I hear somebody trying to speak. Go ahead.
It's Cooper. So,
Cooper. Okay.
So the thing that really stood out to me here, right, is the laws of nature, the equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitled them. And of course, that sort of gets the creator in the second paragraph. And what I thought was interesting is that it's nature's God, right? It's not necessarily, it's sort of like they're referring to a God, but Jefferson's sort of like, I don't know. It doesn't seem like a direct reference to a Christian God, but more of we're going to refer to a God, but we're also going to sort of justify it, I guess, with Enlightenment terms, right? Because Jefferson was a deist. What? It's not like a direct referral to God, but it could be sort of any creator that you have in mind.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a great point, Cooper. That reference to the laws of nature and nature's God, and I think I missed a part of what you said there. But from what I was able to gather, you're absolutely right that the founders here are invoking a God. We're not quite sure, right? It's not very specific, right? They don't come out and say, right, Jesus Christ or Allah or Jehovah, but this is the God of nature. In fact, we'll find there are 3 more references to God in the rest of the Declaration of Independence. He's referred to in the next sentence as the creator of human beings who has endowed human beings with certain unalienable rights. And in the last paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, he's referred to as divine providence and the supreme judge of the world. Right, so he's the God of nature, the creator of human beings and their rights. He's divine providence, meaning right, he sort of oversees his creation, and he also judges it according to, going back to the first paragraph here, perhaps certain laws of nature. What is meant by these laws of nature? And Cooper, I missed a little bit of what you said there. What is this reference to laws of nature and nature's God? What does that mean, and why would Jefferson and the founders invoke these laws to justify their separate and equal stance? Yeah, please.
Sorry. So this is the Enlightenment sort of going on right now. That's like 1700 to 1800.
Okay.
And you have Newton, right? Newton has published the Principia. So it's the beginning of the scientific revolution, where it's this huge deal where they suddenly have laws that seem to define every interaction, right? Every time you drop an apple, it's going to fall to the ground. And
okay,
so
stop there for a second. Stop there for a second.
Oh, I can't hear you.
That's really good. So, right, so when you...
I can't hear you, sorry.
You can't hear me. You can or you can't, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I can't hear you.
You cannot hear me, okay.
You can't hear. Cooper, can you hear me? She can't hear us. She lost her sound for some reason.
Well, what she was saying, I think, was really good.
A bunch of people just lost their audio. I'm reading the chat. Some can hear just fine. Okay, a few people said they lost audio.
All right, now I can hear. Sorry.
Now I can hear. Go ahead.
He's back.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Cooper. Absolutely great insights there. So, what's an example of a law of nature? Can you give me an example? I think you actually already gave one.
Yeah. So I was talking about Newton, right? He's got his three laws.
Yeah,
and
3 laws of motion. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So Jefferson, by invoking the laws of nature, right, he's trying to tie in, saying our right to do this is just as much a part of nature as the fact that if an apple falls to the ground, if you drop an apple, it's going to fall to the ground, right? That's just as much of
yeah, that demonstrates the natural law of gravity.
Right. Yeah.
The apple falling down from the tree.
Right. And so this is our natural right. This is just as much part of the world.
Yeah. That's great.
It's a natural right of a people, right, Cooper? This is a collective right because this thing that to which a people is entitled applies to peoples, right?
Right.
So,
and I think that ties into the whole we hold these truths to be self-evident part.
Yeah.
And an unalienable right. It's
Yeah,
just
so
that whole language of making it. This is something objective, not subjective.
We'll get into the individual aspects of rights, natural rights, in the second paragraph. But it's interesting, as you point out in the very first paragraph, they're already invoking the idea of a natural right that applies to peoples. So a people has a natural right. Now, can I just say, just put this in the historical context again, to show how radical this statement is. Does anybody know how long the idea of sovereign nations has been around? How long have there been sovereign nations? Anybody want to guess? That's an unfair question. Roman Empire, good guess. 200 years is closer. Since the 1500s, not bad. It's actually 1648. So there was if you've studied European history at all, there was a long series of European wars over religion, over Christianity. That the 100 Years' War that ended in 1648 with what was called the Peace of Westphalia. If anybody's familiar with this, and what came out of this Peace of Westphalia was that every European nation agreed with each other by consent that they used to be basically kingdoms, right? But now, after 1648, these kingdoms agree that each other kingdom, or now they'll call them nations, is sovereign over the things that go on within their borders with regard to religion. So after 1648, every nation is sovereign over what religion it wants to be. So this nation can't go attacking another nation because they're Protestant and they want them to be Catholic or vice versa. So the idea of sovereign nations or peoples assuming separate and equal stations has really only been around since 1648. That's just 40 years earlier or something like that. But what I find radical about this opening paragraph of the Declaration is, up to this point, a nation was sovereign by the consent of other nations or other human beings. It was man-made consent where these other people, all these peoples agreed, okay, we'll all be sovereign, you'll be sovereign, and so on and so forth, and we won't tell you what you should do. But the Declaration is saying, no, this right to be a sovereign nation or sovereign people is not just from the consent of other human beings. It comes from some other source, and whatever that source is, Jefferson describes as the laws of nature and nature's God. That's a radical, bold, new statement that is made for the first time in history. So sovereign, as somebody said, what does sovereign mean? Sovereign just means, in terms of your internal politics and policies and laws and customs and religion, whatever it is, no external power, no other nation can tell you what to do. Okay, it means control over your own things internally, right, as a nation or a people. So, but Jefferson's saying, no, this is a question of natural right or natural law as determined by the laws of nature and nature's God. So it's a radical statement. Nobody else in the world believed that at the time, by the way. Only those crazy Americans. And I see a lot of things in the chat here about Locke. Yes, the influence of Locke, the idea of morality and universal standards. These are all great thoughts that are being put in the chat, and they're all connected here somehow. Applied to the level in this paragraph of peoples who have determined that they are entitled to be separate. Not by the consent. So what this means is a people doesn't need the consent of any other people. Now, again, the first paragraph doesn't mention Americans, but you can see how that applies, right? Americans are one of these peoples who have decided that it's necessary for them to separate. They don't need any other nation's permission to do this. They don't need Great Britain's permission. They don't need France's permission. They don't need Spain's permission. They don't need it. So, on the one hand, some people in this first paragraph is sort of saying, oh, those Americans are appealing or supporting, trying to justify themselves to the rest of the world. But what it's really saying is, we're going to do this, and we don't need anybody else's permission to do it. That's a pretty bold statement. So we'll see whether this works or not. Okay, sorry, I talked too much.
Oh, that was really good. I noticed we
Go
had
ahead.
some other people with their hands up, although maybe the hands disappeared on me. I thought Zach had his hand up and Grace had her hand up, I saw. I don't know if you wanted to jump into the conversation here at all, or are we ready to maybe move on to the second sentence?
Can I say something?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Okay, so this is Zeke, by the way, Zechariah. So the last sentence, what should be a sentence, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind to the end. That, lost my train of thought. Sorry, give me a second. It's interesting. He believes that he needs to declare his reasons for doing this. It's not just we're seceding from you because we're not going to tell. He makes it clear that they have a reason to secede, if you will, so that to give them more legitimacy in the eyes of other nations. So France will now support them, not just because they are England's enemy, but because there's a viable reason for them to have seceded.
Okay. Yeah, Zeke. That's a good remark there. I mean, I might quibble over the use of the word secede. That's a word I don't see in the document, right? We want to try to use the language of the documents that we're looking at. But your point is well taken, because what is Jefferson saying here when he speaks of a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation? So what, Zeke, tell me again, what do you think Jefferson's saying there?
He's saying that it is correct to provide the reasons, the grievances in this declaration.
Yeah.
He provides all the reasons that they are separating. I use the word separating, but I do see that.
Yeah, separating. That's good. That's good. Yeah, that's the word Jefferson uses. Why would Jefferson feel compelled to sort of declare the reasons for why we are separating from Great Britain? Because again, to piggyback off of Dr. Burkett's remark, this is something sort of not just extraordinary, but also very, very new, right? That had never been done before by any people anywhere. And you're actually publishing for the world to see. Here's why we're doing it. They didn't have to do that. Why even issue a Declaration of Independence here?
Can I say something?
Yeah, jump in here, please.
So I think one of the reasons that he gave this long list of reasons for why they were separating was because he wanted to show that it was a legitimate cause and there was a legitimate reason to separate from England.
Wow. You know what? I mean, Annika, I think you're exactly right. That's actually a little higher than what I was thinking. I was sort of, thinking lower along the lines of, well, we want to publish this to the world so that as Jefferson puts it, because we respect the opinions of mankind. We respect the opinions of mankind, and we're going to publish and declare to the rest of the world a sort of a justification for our actions, so that they know, so that the rest of the world knows why we're doing what we're doing. But your point is even more interesting than mine. So, Anna, can you repeat that again for us? That they're actually publishing this in order to, that's part of the path of legitimacy. They're trying to make the case for their revolution, not just to the rest of the world, but somehow publishing this declaration is part of making it legitimate. Can you expand upon that a bit?
Yeah, sure. So what I was saying was that he gave these reasons. He wanted the world to see the country as legitimate, not just as they were separating because they wanted to, but they had a legitimate reason to do that, and so they were justified. And in the future, that would give America credibility.
Yeah, is there one word maybe in that first paragraph that demonstrates your point? That is, you said, right, that it legitimizes them, or that what the path that they're taking is legitimate. There's one word in the first paragraph that seems to point to that exact thing. when Jefferson says necessary, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary, right? In other words, we really don't have a choice, right? We have to do this. There's no other way around it. It's gotten to that point. Is that part of where you were going with that, Annika?
Yeah, definitely. He says it's necessary to do that. So it kind of indicates that there is a reason, and it's not like they're just wanting to do this, but they don't have another choice, kind of.
Yeah, the rest of the declaration is about why it's necessary.
Yeah.
Can I jump in? This is a great point. So I can't help but think of it's a simple analogy, but maybe some of you have little brothers or sisters, younger, and you've seen mom or dad or whoever say to little Joey or Susie, clean your room. And your little brother or sister says, no, I don't want to, right? And mom and dad say, well, why not? And what's their response? I just don't want to, right? So, little young, maybe you have really good brothers and sisters. I don't know, but I'm thinking of my own when I was younger, right? So they would just say, no, or yeah, I just want to do this, or I just don't want to do that, whatever it is. And they don't give reasons for it. And I call that rebellion. I think of that as sort of the idea of rebellion. Rebellion means we just don't like what we're being told to do, and we're going to rebel against it, right? But I think, and on Annika's point, is it Annika? How do you pronounce it? Annika? We'll take a guess.
Annika. Yeah.
Okay.
Annika. Yep.
So I because they say we're going to justify, but they don't say justify, but that's what they're getting at, I think. What they're saying too is we're not just rebels. We think we have legitimate causes, and the legitimate causes, as Professor Stevens says, have made it necessary for us to do this. And we're going to lay out reasons, unlike a 3-year-old kid who just doesn't like what's being done, right? We're going to lay out what we think are legitimate reasons, and by doing so, perhaps we would also be showing a decent respect to the opinions of mankind by saying we think there are people out there in the world who may read our legitimate reasons and learn from them and agree with us on these things. A few people want to jump in too on this, I see here. I'm just looking over in the chat box here. Who wanted to jump in? Somebody wanted to jump in. Good point. I'm scrolling. Grace, please.
Well, it's kind of to the point that Annika was saying, but when I read the definition, I kind of saw that the last clause says declare the clauses compel them to operation, so that it a decent respect to the opinions of mankind. They should. This wasn't going to be like an anarchy per se, but that there was a reason they were doing this, and he held the opinion that people shouldn't just say we're gonna that's it, but we respect others and give them the reasons why. It's kind of piggybacking off of it, honestly.
Yeah, those are great points. Yeah, again, very well said. And Joey also wants to jump in on this. Please, Joey.
So this is more of a question than adding on to stuff. Do you think that it was an absolute necessity for them to so explicitly say why they wanted to leave?
Yeah, well, this is
or do you think that's it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, that's why we have to. This is actually a good, based on what you're asking and what Annika and Grace were saying. This is actually a good point to jump into the second paragraph, probably, because notice how the second paragraph begins. It begins with the word we, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident. So the second paragraph begins by saying, here are things we believe to be true. So on your question, when you work through the list of things that they hold to be true in the second paragraph, if they really believe those things to be true, then what they're saying is, in light of that, in light of the things we hold to be true, and then in light of the things the king has done that comes in that list of grievances next, then we had no choice but to engage in revolution, not rebellion, revolution out of necessity.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to give reasons, and in light of the reasons, they're going to say, we believe in these things. Here are the ways in which Great Britain has violated these things repeatedly. And in light of those things, and even, we've been asking for peace, right, for a year prior to this.
Mm-hmm.
Since,
Yeah.
the shooting started at Lexington and Concord. We've been appealing to their been holding out olive branches and trying to resolve this peacefully. It finally comes to the point where they say, in light of the things we believe to be true, and in light of the things the king repeatedly has done, as Jefferson puts in the second paragraph, we're only declaring independence after a long train of abuses has made it clear that the British don't just, that not only do they want to treat us unequally, they want to oppress us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why Jefferson says it's our right and our duty now to fight back.
Yeah.
I was wondering, sorry for cutting off. This is Lee talking. I just wanted, another reason why I'm thinking maybe they would have been listing all these reasons that they would decide to separate from England, is that this, you can describe this time as a very dangerous time. They were making a dangerous decision. And so part of the reason that I think they might have been saying these things is that they could have been considering the possibility of failure. And could they be listing these reasons for their separation because they were thinking, well, if it fails in the future, we have at least a record now of what we meant to do back then.
That's a great point.
It just something that occurred to me.
It's probably not going to save their lives. Is it Lee? Right? Yeah. It may not save their lives if they lose, but at least they'll leave behind maybe some record for posterity, right? That maybe someday somebody will look back and say, oh, they really were justified. By the way,
right. In any case, it's recording their thoughts at the time, and if they need to refer back to them, I don't know.
Yeah, it is dangerous. As I think it was Franklin. Was it Franklin, Jason, who said, after they signed the Declaration of Independence, he said, we must now hang together or we will surely hang together.
Well, we must all hang together, or most assuredly, we will all hang separately.
Hang separately, that's what it was, yeah, right. So clearly dangerous. And that, by the way, the ending, of course, of the Declaration, not to skip ahead here, but, ends with that, note, we are risking our lives, our honor, and our fortunes, our lives, and our sacred honor, right?
Yeah.
So, good. But when you look at those rights in the second paragraph, the specific things that are mentioned, right? The self-evident truths. We believe all men are created equal. Now, by the way, what does that actually mean, right? All men are created equal. That's something we'll be discussing over the next series. This whole series of webinars is what does it mean to say all men are created equal. At any rate, they declared it. We believe that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, among others, right? What do those things mean? We'll be discussing those over the rest of the webinars. Governments are instituted to secure those rights, the Declaration says, and they derive their just powers from consent, the consent of the governed. When you take those four things, and then the fifth one is, and when government, after a long train of abuses, if a government reveals that it is trying to violate those previous four things, all men are created equal, natural rights, security of rights, can consent, then you can engage in revolution, the second paragraph says. It's only after you look at those five, what we call principles, or first things, or first ideas, in the second paragraph, that the long list of specific complaints and the grievances makes sense. I think. Otherwise,
I think you're absolutely right about it.
Leave that second paragraph out, and you just go right to the complaints. They're just complaining. Go ahead, please, Jason. I'm sorry.
I think somebody else wants to jump in. Go ahead.
Somebody wanted to jump in. Please go right ahead.
Oh, well, I was just thinking that it was really interesting how later in the Declaration of Independence it says that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. So, they did have a good reason to declare independence.
Yeah. You don't just overthrow government for just silly, right? It's serious. Because people are going to die, property's going to be harmed. Bad things are going to happen. So you don't do this for just any old reason. you've got to really think it's absolutely necessary, right? To go back to answer the question, I'm sorry, I forget who asked earlier, did they really think it was necessary? So.
Yeah, and you mentioned that list of grievances, and I think that you're absolutely right that you need the first two paragraphs, right, for that list of grievances to really mean anything. I also think if you go through that list of grievances and pick anyone just at random, and you'll find that you can sort of link that grievance back to one of the specific first principles that Jefferson articulates in the first two paragraphs. It'll be related to the violation of the consent of the governed, or that the king has violated the purpose of government and the security of unalienable rights. All those grievances actually represent violations of the principles that Jefferson is laying out in those first two paragraphs.
Yeah, just even if you just look at the first, just take the first couple grievances against the king. He has refused his assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance. Right? I mean, that's a violation of that third principle in the second paragraph that says governments are instituted among men to secure rights. So the British government is not securing our rights, right? Again, it has to be linked to a principle, as Professor Stevens says. Otherwise, it's just a complaint. So what? If you didn't put that second paragraph and the Americans said, he's not passing laws wholesome and necessary for the public good, you can say, so what? The British are sovereign. Don't they have a right to pass any laws or not pass any laws they want? They're in charge. What's wrong with that? They have the power. You see, this is the important thing. Without a statement of principles in the second paragraph, everything comes down to power, or the idea that might makes right. The British have all the power. They're the most powerful nation in the world. And if they have the power, they ought to decide what's right. What Americans are saying by including the second paragraph is, no, there are some things that are right or wrong, regardless of power. The British may have the power, and they may utterly destroy us, which by all rights, they probably should have. I see a lot of people chatting about Washington and the military situation, right? It was dismal, as Eric points out. But Americans were willing to risk that because of their belief that there are some things that are just right, as articulated in the second paragraph. That's, again, when you read it in this way, these are really bold and daring and audacious claims.
Especially the claim that all men are created equal, right?
Right.
I mean, how does that advance the revolutionary cause? It seems they could issue this Declaration of Independence and not say, at the same time, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. That seems to, it goes back to the point you were making earlier, Chris, about how unique, how new what the founders were doing here. Really how new it was, that it's nothing like this had ever been attempted before. And we can extend that even further to say that you don't have any government anywhere, right, in its founding charter, in its founding document, arguing for the natural equality of all human beings. Right? That is something that you wouldn't, that no other nation at any other time in history had ever done. No government in the history of the world had ever been founded upon the principle of human equality.
Yeah, and they make that claim at a moment when even in the American states, colonies then states, not everybody actually is equal politically, right? That's an audacious statement. So again, there are a couple of ways you can think about that. You can say, well, that's hypocritical of them, or you can say, well, they're being bold. This is how Abraham Lincoln tended to think of that statement. They were being bold in making the claim of something that's right, even at a time when their own political society didn't align with those claims of right.
Yeah.
Which means over time, hopefully, we're going to have to catch up politically in terms of equality with the thing we say ought to be true, right, in terms of all men being created equal. And again, we're running out of time here, and I apologize. This is the way it goes when you have a really good, interesting conversation, which I think this has been. We're running a little low on time. and the conversations go fast. But that's one of the great themes of the Declaration that we'll be exploring in later seminars, right? Looking especially at the problem of slavery and segregation. On the question of liberty, are we doing the religious liberty next time, Jason? Or
I think that's the next document. Yeah, Jefferson's Virginia Statute for Religious Liberty.
Right. So the claim in the second paragraph about unalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, among others, right? One that's not listed there is the right to religious freedom or the right to conscience, right?
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about that through other documents. We started with the idea of unanimous, and somebody kept using the term succession instead of separation. We're going to talk about all of these ideas that come up in the Declaration in future webinars this year by looking at other documents that follow from this. So I think we've only scratched the surface here, obviously, right? And that's about this has been about as good as anybody can do in an hour, I think.
Yeah. Look, this was a wonderful conversation, and I mean, I think we got through a lot, but you're right. We just barely scratched the surface. And my American Political Thought 1 class, we spent like 2 weeks on the Declaration of
Independence. Yeah, easily. Yeah.
Right, and you could spend another 2 weeks on it easily. So
Nicholas wants to jump in really quick before we end. We've got to go, Nicholas. Go ahead, please.
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yeah, go right ahead, Nicholas.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So I was reading something for a comparative government class, and then the author made the point that like the American Revolution was different from like the French Revolution because they were more orderly. So I thought them being more orderly was like they went through the whole like the Declaration of Independence, kind of announcing the reasons why they wanted to rebel, not just rebelling. And then like the French Revolution, they stormed the Bastille, and then they executed the king. And I thought that it's much more orderly this way.
Yeah, that's a huge story and an important difference. I mean, there are a number of differences. Obviously, the American Revolution is a revolution of one people trying to overthrow what they consider to be an external power governing them, right, after declaring independence. Of course, the French Revolution is class warfare. That's really what it comes down to in many ways, right? It's the war of the people, the common people against the church, aristocrats, and the king, right? And if I can just say something else very quickly, I think the Americans wanted to be, not to say they always were, but there was something much more sedate and reasoned about what Americans were doing. And if you know anything about the French Revolution, it's chaos. It's chaos. And it very quickly degenerates into mass murder on massive scales unknown in human history prior to this, right? So some important differences, and I think that's tied to the principles of the second paragraph. Again, it's a huge oversimplification here, but these are the things we'll keep playing with over the course of the year in our webinars, okay? So I hope you all come back and join us for some future ones. I've enjoyed this very much, and I've learned a great deal, as always, as I do from these things. So thank you very much. Professor Stevens, any last thoughts?
No, that's great. I look forward to seeing you all again. This sounds like it's going to be a great group, and I look forward to our next meeting.
Excellent, me too. And I think maybe we worked out some of the bugs tonight. We'll try to figure out the hand raising thing for next time. Maybe that'll work and that'll help. So, all right, take care, everybody. Look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night. Thanks, Katie.